How long are we? We
Yes.
started?
Yes, we have.
Oh, good. Okay, good morning or afternoon, as it is here, and I don't know what
Well,
it is.
in some parts of Australia, it's still morning.
Yeah, that's true too. So we covered it in good morning, afternoon, and good night, depending on where you come from. This particular video is about two things. It's firstly about the next online conference, which has become quite the topic of aliens in the air has become quite popular at the moment.
Relevant.
Mr. Biden's even spoken about it, hasn't he?
Yes.
And don't worry, it's not from China. They're objects, but they don't know where they've come from. Or yes, they do know where they've come from, but unfortunately they haven't found the wreckage, have they?
No, it could be a consortium of business.
Yes,
people.
probably business people, but they haven't found the evidence for that. But that's okay. But we're going to look at it from the point of view of not so much what's in the air, but what's been found in the ground, both in Australia, Central America, and South America. And what we're also going to do is we're going to look at the more important question, not why, not if they've come here, but why they came. So that's one part of what we're going to look at with our online conference. The second part is an article which I've just put up, which is about an elder called Karno, who we believe is unlike any elder at the present moment anywhere on this in Australia, if not the world. And we've written a very, very long article about him, which goes for 6,500 words. And what I'm going to suggest to people is, please, for those people who don't like reading long pieces of work, it's broken up into 9 segments of 9 different things that Karno did. And what I would suggest is, for those of you who don't want to read all of it, read a bit of it each time and make it like a series of articles rather than just one article. And that might get people to look at the actual article. What I am going to do right now in the time we've got is I'm going to tell you one of many instances of things Karno said and did that don't fit. I've got to be honest, and I've written this in the article. If this stuff was recorded 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, in Judea, Palestine, and that area, it'd be in the Bible and it would be called a miracle, wouldn't it?
Would be, yes.
There's nothing else it could be called. Now, the stories we're going to talk about, with the exception of this 9 that I've raised in this article, all bar 2 of them were witnessed by many other people.
Oh, I was there for some of them.
You were there for the disappearing, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
Right, the disappearing, the Graham Hancock and his wife Sanford were there for, and quite a few other elders and people who are prepared to sign stat decks to back up the fact that this actually happened. But what I'm going to talk about today is about an incident that I didn't record in the book because I never saw it. And it was told to me last week by Karno's wife. And we're talking about actually writing a full book, and everyone involved has got different incidents. We're all going to put it together in one large story. But I want to share with you what Christine, his wife, said about an event that, Evan, you weren't there for, were you?
Which one was this one?
This is the one about the ant's nest.
No, I wasn't there for that.
No, you weren't there for the ant's nest, and nor was I. And it goes like this. Christine started telling us about the time when Karno found a dead goanna, and I thought, begin with, well, fine, but that's not actually something special of itself, is it, Evan? No. We found a few dead animals, in fact, a couple of days ago. In fact, yesterday, you buried a dead cat, didn't you?
Yeah.
That was rather sad, wasn't it? A psychic friend of ours whose cat was like a child has passed on, and that was quite dramatic. This wasn't so dramatic because it was a goanna. Wasn't a pet goanna, unlike Karno's pet dingo, which I do talk about, and it died. And what happened was, Christine told me that Karno took that goanna and placed it on top of this massive ants mound. And the ants are particularly, how can I put this, animated when you put a dead goanna on top of an ants mound.
They'd be a bit excited.
They were a bit excited.
Yeah.
And my understanding is, a couple of hours later, guess what was left? The bones.
Wow.
It was a big goanna.
They got in there.
They cleaned it up completely. And when Christine told me that, and she was talking about things that Karno did, I thought, well, Christine, putting a dead animal on an ant's nest doesn't really equate with the stuff we've got, does it? But it did.
Oh.
It did. You haven't heard this either.
No.
So this is for Evan as well as you. And if you're not interested, Evan is anyway now.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
So then what happened was, about a week later, Karno took some of the people he's working with, and one Wiradjuri. He took him down to the ant's nest. And this ant's nest is a big mound, and they are vicious, man. They're really big. She said each ant was over 1 centimetre long. And that's a fairly big ant, isn't it? And they've got big nippers. Obviously, if you're going to clean up a goanna, you've got nippers. And he told Karno to stand on that mound for the next hour. Now, I want you to imagine for a sec, you're standing with Karno. You can see these things coming out, running all around, right? There's thousands of them. Yeah. And he says to you, go and stand on top of the mound.
I mean, how well did I go the other day when I had jumping in the car?
Oh, yeah.
On the freeway versus Evan versus ant versus truck. It did not want to slow down.
No, and you're trying to get rid of the ant, and the truck is bipping.
I don't know if anyone's been bitten by a jumping jack ant or a jumping ant, as I like to call them. They hurt. Apparently,
these ones hurt more.
Wow.
Anyway, I want you to imagine you've been asked by Karno, and I tell a story about me being actually to go out and see a fish trap, and he told me to go out and look at it. And I said, well, Karno, I'll take my shoes and my jeans off first. He said, no, go out there now.
Yeah.
And I thought I was doing it tough by doing that. No. Not like Wiradjuri. So then what happened was Wiradjuri looked at him, and Karno repeated, I want you to go and stand on the ant's nest for the next hour. Didn't tell him why. Just told him to do it.
No, he never really does.
He never does.
He just got to do it.
So anyway, he did it. He stood on there, but as he started to walk towards it, Karno sat down and broke into song. And for the next hour, and it was for an hour, he had to stand for the full hour. He stood on that nest, and he never got bitten once.
That's amazing.
Now, I want you to think about that, ladies and gentlemen. I want you to think about any scientist you know that studies ants, and I want you to think about whether they could actually do what he did. This is much worse than a jumping ant or a bull ant. This is really bad news, this one. And for 1 hour, he stood on that ant's nest right near the opening, on both feet on each side of it, and they walked over his feet, they walked around him, but they did not bite him. The whole time. And Karno kept, those soft songs he sings? He sang one of those, and the ants did not touch him. Wow. Now, I want you to think about that. You would say today one of two things: I don't believe it, but then you'd be calling Christine a liar, and that's not a very good idea, is it, Evan? No, not Christine. No. And secondly, Christine would never lie about anything Karno did. That's just not going to happen. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's not in my article because it's not something I experienced. What I experienced were 9 different events that proved to me something about Karno that we've met. And I write this at the very start of the article. I start by saying we've been in contact over the last 4 decades. We've been in contact with literally hundreds of original elders. Some of those elders, it's a self-proclaimed political statement, an account of their grey hairs. It's got nothing to do with the fact they know very little about old ways. They've claimed to be an elder, and I've got to tell you make a point here. Karno once told me that when you're dealing with original people, be wary of anyone that comes up to you and introduces themselves as an elder before you get the chance to think it. And they tell you what they are. He said, be very careful with that person because it may well be that is not the case. We've been with other elders who deserve that accreditation, don't we? And I mentioned too, in particular, the late Aunty Beve and Uncle Marbuck, who were elders of the very highest degree. But above them stood one person, and that was Karno. And that article I wrote, and it was basically out of a meeting we had with the elders 2 weeks ago where we spoke about the fact that we needed to write something in a website they're putting up. They're setting up their own website about Karno, and they're trying to set up a fund, put up a keeping place, which on 2 occasions they nearly had up, didn't we? And then the government stepped in and stopped the whole thing. And I don't write about that in the article. That's not what this is about. This is about Karno. And I would suggest to people, it is really worth your time if you can find the time. And if you can't do it in one shot, that's fine. I get that, because it is 6,500 words, and I've been trying to cut my articles down, and I've gone to the other extreme, haven't I? But here's the point.
I was a bit shocked.
I chose 9 incidents that involve Karno. I think 5 you would call miracles, and 4 are just different things he did to give you a feel for what he's like and the way he teaches. The way he teaches is quite different, isn't it, Evan?
Yeah.
It's basically ridicule, isn't it?
Well,
well-natured, well-meant
yeah,
ridicule.
there's a bit of humour in there. I'll forever be known as icing sugar.
That's right.
Because I saw this kind of bank of black, ominous-looking clouds that look like
rolling towards us.
They came straight from Antarctica to just dump icy wind and rain and coldness on us. And I'm in this little flimsy tent. I didn't have the pegs, so I was using sticks to tie the tent down. It blew off twice with me in it the night before. So I'm like, Karno, should we maybe move some of the tents underneath the big pavilion?
The shelter?
The shelter, yeah. It was like, you know, like there'd still be a wind, but it wouldn't necessarily get wet per se.
Right.
And he said, icing sugar. And I'm like, excuse me, what do you mean? You're icing sugar. Right? Well, I'm icing sugar? He's going, what's going to happen to you if rain gets on you? Will you melt like icing sugar? I'm like, well, no.
He said, and you had to stay there, didn't you?
So I had to stay there, and then I was known as icing sugar for the rest of the
that
few days. Yeah.
And probably, Evan, to be honest, you were known as icing sugar from that point on.
To the end of time, basically.
Yeah. I can tell you about one occasion very briefly that took place where after Karno had been on up at the Standing Stone site and called up the 8 hawks that circled in infinity, and it's sign of the infinity, which is an 8, directly above him. And I talk about that. We went back to our place that night around the fire pit. And quite a few of the people there said, go up and ask Karno how he did that. I said, I'm not.
They're really good at whispering. You go do it.
Yeah,
I'm terrified. I can't do it, but you do it.
No. And everyone's terrified because when he looks at them, mate, he just undresses them. You can see straight through them. And everyone who knows that's true, as anyone who's ever been looked at by Karno, will tell you the same thing. I just said to him, nah, not touching it. I'm not going near it, because whatever I get back won't answer the question. And he'll ask me a question I can't answer, then laugh at me for not getting it right.
So it reminds me, I'm going to grab something.
Yeah. And look, what happened was during that night we sat around there, and Karno spent most of the night asking me questions, and I couldn't get him right. And he laughed at me and made fun at the fact I couldn't get it right time after time.
I was supposed to know what this meant. It's a shell.
Yeah. And he asked you what it meant, and you didn't know, did you?
No, I didn't know.
And you got into trouble, didn't you?
Yep.
And I said, mate, I'm not doing it. But the interesting part was somebody come up to me at the end of the night and said, how do you feel about that? I said, you feel about what? He said, feel about the fact that all night long he was ripping into you all the time and laughing at you and making fun of you. And I said to this guy, I said, well, how many times did he ever go at you? And he said, oh, none. I said, you mean he spent all night talking to me, asking me cultural questions that I couldn't get right? I said, mate, that was an honour. I said, that's the way he does things. That's the way elders do things. And remember, and you've got to remember, I said, remind us each time when he actually made fun of me, he had a smile on his face, didn't he? He said, yeah, he did. It's because he likes me. I said, you would, if he ever does that to you and he makes fun of you and makes you feel like an idiot, take it as a compliment. He's trying to teach you, because eventually the question that he asks you, you'll think about it and you'll think about it. And often he would bring me up and ask me questions and I could never get them right. And time after time, I'd think about it. Maybe a week and a half later, I'd work it out. And on one occasion, when he asked me a question on the phone, I knew the answer and I gave it straight away. And I was really feeling proud of myself. And his comment was, well, it's about time. I've been waiting long enough, and finally you got one thing right. You got a long way to go. That is, I've got incidents of that in the article, and I've got incidents of things that do not make sense if you use white fella science, if you use white fella parameters. And the reason I'm putting this up is because on one occasion he did actually I think he gave an explanation to how he did the disappearing, didn't he, Evan? To someone the next day.
Someone got enough nerve to go ask.
Yeah, because I wouldn't do it. And he gave them a proper answer, and he finished it with this. And he finished it with the most important part of the answer. And he said, what I've done, what I saw, is not magic. It's open to every human on this planet. I just didn't forget it, and you have. But you are capable of disappearing, of calling hawks, of calling eagles, of doing the most amazing things. We are all capable of this. And Karno was an example, a human example of our real capacities and capabilities. And that's why I've written this article. And what I'm suggesting to people is, look, come along to our website, because we're going to answer by consulting another elder who I consider the equal of Karno. But he doesn't live on this planet, because there is no one else on this planet that's the equal of him. He's off world. And I'm going to be asking him what I think is the most important question. And I'm up to about 14 different questions, and I'm sending them off to Leah later on today. She will ask Mesrith those questions. She will then write them down. She will not tell me the answer until we're doing the presentation, and she will read it out to me, and then I'll hear it for the first time like you guys will. And I'm going to be asking the most important question: why did they come? What is the purpose behind this? And what was the event that they were so keen to see come to fruition? And I'm going to be talking about that in some detail. I will also be talking about Mr. Biden and about his take on things, and what those objects, because I want to make a point there, the general, whose name I've forgotten, that's the head of the whole group that looks after this, said, they are not balloons, they are objects. We chose that word for a reason, and then never told us what the reason was. I find that fascinating. Mr. Biden said that one of those 4 things was Chinese, and they recovered it, didn't they? And the 3 they didn't recover, he said they're definitely not Chinese. Now, I got a question for you, Evan. If you've got evidence of one thing, the balloon, which was Chinese, then you can't find the other 3. Mind you, they would have had the coordinates of when they shot it down, right?
Yeah.
Right? But they haven't found it, and they never will find it. That's what they're going to tell us, right? How do you know it's not Chinese? Tell me how you know it's not Chinese if you haven't got the evidence in front of you. We know that one was a cylindrical object. Yes. One was an octagonal object, and one was as big as a small car. So they're all different makes, aren't they? They're not the same thing 3 times over, are they? They're all completely different. So how do you know who made it?
You wouldn't know unless
it was businessmen, because that's what he told us.
What private business?
Yes.
People just putting stuff up,
just launching things up there, right?
Yeah.
And then they said they shot them down to protect the people, right?
Well, what people are living up there?
What, in the Yukon or Alaska?
Would that be tundra? Or
yes,
very close
it is.
to
Yeah.
tundra?
Oh, look, there could be a couple of moose.
Right.
You want to protect them, wouldn't you?
So,
and here's the other point. What made them think, if it's up there 20,000 feet in the air, that they're under attack, particularly if it's not Chinese, right? And it's done by businessmen. Do businessmen launch things to attack people and destroy them?
Well, in Bond films, perhaps.
Oh, of course they do, yeah.
Don't think they do it normally, but...
So what we found when we listened to all the official explanations about... And what also is interesting is NASA. Remember, the Pentagon put out a report and said the UFOs were probably launched by by Russians or Chinese. Well, Joe Biden said it's not Chinese. So he's actually contradicting what the Pentagon said about a year before, isn't he? Because he knows it's not Chinese now.
They sound very confused.
So it must be the Russians, who are at the moment quite busy in Ukraine.
I thought they were quite.
I thought they were quite occupied with Ukraine.
They've got stuff going on at the moment.
But you know, when the Senate committee in America and the Pentagon investigated UFOs, they listed the Chinese, Russians, and aliens, right? They never mentioned businessmen, did they?
No, that was never there.
No, but now that they've not got the wreckage and they've never seen the wreckage, they've brought in a new group.
Right.
Now, what I'm going to say is, going on that, we've got the head of the group that investigates this. He's a general, and he's in. It's in the questions. I've got his name. I've got a quote from him saying it's an object. It's not a balloon. And we've chose that word for a very good reason, but we're not going to tell you that. And actually, I saw an article before where they said the same thing. It's an object, but we're not going to tell you why we got that. But if one day in the future they do tell us,
Right.
I'm sure we'll all believe it, won't we? You'd have to believe them, wouldn't you? And particularly since Biden has now said, it's announced officially that it's not Chinese, because we have not examined the wreckage and we don't know where it is. But it's probably businessmen. Which businessmen? Which ones? Must be at that Musk guy. He must be launching cars and octagonal things and cylindrical things up into the air. But the other thing is, if they did launch it, wouldn't the Americans know about that?
Yeah, you can't really just put things in the sky. Like, I think even to have a drone, well, at least in Australia, you have to have a license.
You do.
Because it could interfere with other
But I
things.
suppose in America, you're allowed to set up your own launching pad, your own space program, and just launch things, and no one knows about it.
And then what? Then put it in other countries like Canada?
Yeah, that's what you do. And see, that to me, I mean, now that the President of the United States have said that, we really should accept that as the truth, shouldn't we?
Well, that's what they would want.
Yeah. Well, we've decided we're going to go separately. We're going to actually ask Mesref for his take on that. Now, I know he's not the President of America and stuff like that. I'm going to ask him what the hell they are, because I've got a suspicion that maybe the general and the president aren't telling us the whole story.
Oh.
I know that's a bit radical to say, and we'll probably get shadow banned. Oh, we already are. Oh, it doesn't matter then. Oh, we're safe. We've already been shadow banned, so we're okay there. We're all right. We'll just get shadow banned again. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that's what the article's about. And that is what our next online conference is about. And the most important part of that online conference, if you're new and you don't want to become a subscriber yet because you're not convinced it's worth the money, well, guess what? You can watch this one for free.
Yeah, you can watch it for free on the day.
On the day.
Not an issue. But we do recommend becoming a member, because then you can rewatch that conference anytime you want.
And the 25 before.
The 25 before, and you'll have access to our little meetings as well that we have once a month, Q&A sessions just with our subscribers. Plus then when we do different things like workshops, you get discounts. So
20% off. We are going to be doing some workshops this year again in a couple of months, once we just get settled with a few other things. We've been caught up with the books a fair bit at the moment.
Well, there's an update. The Slater book, I finally fixed the index. It's off to my graphic designer, and she's starting to look at it. So
right. So the first Slater book is coming up. And by the way, the second Slater book, this chapter I've just put up, is in that book. I'm giving you one chapter from the second book just as a taster about Karno, because that information should be shared everywhere. And if you've got to buy it through the book, then you don't get access to it. And we've made sure that all of our information, you can buy it if you wish, or you can get it for free. So people who are having a go at us for making money out of this, can I remind you once again that every article that we've written, some have been redone and rescheduled and remodeled and put into books and stuff, but you can still find that information for free. We make sure of that. We make it go both ways. We make it so it's free, and if you want to become a subscriber, that means you can watch all of hundreds upon hundreds of hours of the 26 on conferences we did before for free at your leisure. And plus this one, if you find it interesting and you've missed some things you want to come back to, you can watch it again later.
Plus, when you start up as a member, you get 7 days free anyway, so it gives you a good chance to see what's going on,
to trial it. So if you decide, oh, this is rubbish, you get 7 days to look at it first before you commit the money towards it. So we're trying to make this as user friendly as we can, but most importantly, this time around, as I said, please read Karno's article. It's worth the read. And secondly, more importantly, come along to our free workshop and find out the story, not about what's flying in the air, because you know what, people can make up stories around that, can't they? Easily make up story. But what if you've got a skull in your hand that doesn't look like any skull that's ever been found, which we have? How do you make that up? And how can you turn it into a businessman? Pretty hard, isn't it? You can't turn our skull into a Chinese person, a European person, any person on this planet. You can't do that. And what about the objects we've got that have been formally analysed and that we found that stuff within it is not on this planet?
Yeah.
You can't dismiss those sort of things. You can't talk them around. You can, oh, Evan, I've always been a big fan of Joy Division. You have someone on side there. That was like the time I wore the Yes T-shirt about 8-9 years ago, and Shane saw it for the first time. It's right, I want to join this mob. You've got someone from Joy Division. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, please join us for our online conference. It's on the end of this week, either on Sunday in Australia or Saturday in most other places. And in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, stay well, because the whole thing's falling apart. And remember, one last piece of advice. As the world does fall apart, don't wallow in it. Don't fight with it. Don't get upset with it. Just say whatever and move on. And remember, there's a light at the end of this tunnel, unlike any light that's ever been on this planet. And by the way, on this weekend, we are going to go back to what happened at Uluru as part of the explanation as to what happens next. So for now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and until next time. Okay, you're going to turn that off?
Yeah.